Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. I have with me today one of my favorite guests, and that is Jane G. Goldberg. Jane is a psychoanalyst, and I'm really happy that she has delved into the world of public access and now wants to delve even farther into the world of the internet using her skills. And she's got an interesting announcement. So thank you, Jane, for joining me on this show.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what first attracted you to the work that I was doing and to public access, and why you thought it might be a match for what you were doing?
Well, I think it's all about getting out whatever message it is that one has, and there's today no more effective way than using the internet. Mm-hmm. And I'm a fan of TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I watch TV.
Has it been like that all your life?
No. I think I've gone through many decades without watching TV, but my work is very mental, and at come 9 o'clock, I want to be relatively brain dead. So I find TV very entertaining. So I was drawn to public access.
Now, in your own life, when you were growing up in New Orleans, were you encouraged to watch or discouraged to watch?
Well, I grew up when TV first started,
Mm-hmm.
and every Saturday morning was Sky King.
Oh,
and
I remember Sky King.
Do you remember Sky King? Who was after Sky King?
Fury.
Do you remember Fury, the horse?
Oh, right.
But that was the only time I watched TV.
I just remember growing up in Berkeley, California, a lot of my playmates were professors' children, and some of them weren't allowed to watch television.
Right.
So that's why I was just wondering if you came from that kind of background.
No.
No? So
no, I had very libertarian parents, and I've tried raising my daughter similarly because I think that, and perhaps this will lead us into a discussion about psychoanalysis, I think that anytime you put restrictions on people, put somebody in a box, and they don't want to be in the box, they want to be out of the box. And I think restrictions, either in terms of parenting, in terms of government, in terms of how one thinks, how one is taught to think, that in terms of medicine, that you always want to go beyond the box that you're feeling constrained in. And that's a good impulse, to want to go outside the box, as we say.
I see. Well, I know what most excited me about working with you when I first got to know you is you said that when you were a child you wanted to grow up and be a parapsychologist, right?
Well, there's nothing more out of the box than thinking that people can communicate with each other telepathically.
Right, right. Now, where did you even know that there was such a thing as
Oh,
parapsychology?
I was psychic.
I see. And did your parents encourage or discourage, or just not even
No,
know?
my mother was
You were psychic enough not to even mention it to them?
Yeah, my mother was psychic also.
Oh, she was?
Yeah.
I see.
My mother always knew when there was going to be a baby born in the family because she would dream of a death. And then she used her logic to figure out, who had gotten married recently and who it was time. And so she'd always know before they knew that they were going to be pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean like the person who died was going to jump into a new body, or just?
No, she just,
the death,
it was unrelated who died in the dream and who was pregnant, but she always knew when she had a death dream that it meant there was going to be a birth.
I see. So that's on a cosmic level of endings and beginnings?
Oh, sure.
And she knew how to interpret that?
Sure.
So she encouraged you? Or you
her
chip off the old block?
Her being encouraged me.
Right.
We didn't even specifically talk about it. It just was between us.
Okay, well that's interesting.
I had a dream of New Orleans flooding before Katrina. I saw the whole city underwater. Now, I don't know, maybe that's not such an odd dream to have because New Orleans is below sea level. New Orleans is where I grew up, so I have an affinity for thinking about it.
Right.
But the dream was, it was pretty powerful. I had, my mother was on an airplane. She was flying from Texas to New Orleans. And I had this premonition that this was a terrible idea. And this was before cell phones. And I just had to have a way of contacting her and telling her not to get on that airplane. But there was no way. and I just was filled with dread for a couple of hours until she called me. The plane had mechanical trouble and it didn't fly. So they took everybody off the plane. And she called me from the airport saying, I'm not on the plane yet.
So you get the feeling when people are psychic, it can also be kind of a curse. They see things that other people aren't seeing, or maybe they give some warnings and it's not heeded. The idea of psychoanalysis, though, seems to me that you can help people do things or make differences in their life.
The meaning of psychoanalysis is that we construct our lives internally, and that we create meaning. And so to superimpose that idea on being psychic or parapsychology as a science or art is that it can mean anything, any meaning you bring to it and any meaning you want it to have. You can see it as a curse or you can see it as a blessing.
But when you were saying, when you were explaining to me the importance in psychoanalysis of freedom of thought, it's important when you're working with people that they're not feeling that there's some thoughts they're not allowed to have or are bad thoughts, but that all should be explored in order to be analyzed?
The instruction that I give my patients, that all analysts give their patients, is say what comes to your mind, follow your thoughts, tell me what you're thinking and feeling, tell me your life story. So it's an encouragement to have absolute internal freedom. Mm-hmm. That you can, in your inner life, you can go anywhere. In your inner life, you can blow up buildings. You can be a serial murderer. Mm-hmm. You can be a Don Juan. Mm-hmm. You can, in your inner life, fantasy reigns.
And the analyst is not going to judge it. Otherwise, people will start to not express certain thoughts.
There's no room in judgmentalness in analysis for one's inner life.
But then eventually when you want them to make it work with their outer life, that seems a responsibility, right?
Well,
to say,
you know, it's a little like, do you need to take math in grammar school? It's really boring for most people. But it gives you a skill that if you decide to be an architect, it lays a foundation. If you decide that you're going to be a cashier in a grocery store, it gives you a foundation. So it gives you an ability to use in your outside life that you don't have unless you do have some basic skills in arithmetic and math. And the skills that you learn, the emotional skills that you learn from being analyzed, are usually not skills that you learn. You certainly don't learn them in school. There's no emotional education in school. If you had great parents, then you probably learned it, but most people don't have great parents. You know, most people have okay parents, and a lot of people have bad parents. And so those emotional lessons that you learn are usually not very relevant or adaptable to living a good, productive life.
Right.
So,
but the idea of going into analysis is that you want a good, productive life, right?
Most people go into analysis because they're in pain, not because they want a good, productive life. That's kind of much farther down the line of what it is that you set as a goal. The thing about analysis that differentiates itself from any other system of organizing how one thinks and how one feels and the life one wants to construct is that if you go into Barnes & Noble and you look at the books, they're all about how to achieve happiness, how to feel better. Psychoanalysis is not about happiness, it's about freedom.
Right.
It's the only construct that's been created that has as its goal simply freedom. And so the importance in terms of this country, the USA of
United States of America.
United States of America, is that we live in a democracy, or at least we aspire to live in a perfect democracy. We approximate that more or less. A democracy needs an institute like analysis, psychoanalysis, because democracy itself is founded on the principle of freedom.
Right.
So once you start regulating how people should be thinking and feeling, you lose the foundation of democracy.
So do you see that your work on public access will protect that inner sanctity of thought?
Well, I certainly see that public access allows much more freedom of thought, presentation of ideas than network television.
Now, I was at St. Mark's Church and came late to the expo because they had a speaker afterwards who was a social worker who was very mature and prominent in the field of mental illness. And she started going through the list of what mental illness was. And one of them, I can't remember the name, is where you can be very successful in your career. You're a competent person, but you're not happy. And I asked the question, if you're not happy, how would that affect a child? Would a child be sensitive that they could pick up that this maybe high achiever parent isn't actually happy and therefore not want to be that way? And then ultimately she was pushing not only for medication, because she said at Pillsbury, it was a big mental hospital somewhere.
Excuse me, do you mind if I pull my hair out?
Why?
Because medication is an attempt to anesthetize people against their feelings.
Well, what I'm... Really?
Really.
Okay, and then what?
People have the resources with which to figure out what's going on for them. And if something is wrong and you're not happy, I mean, again, happiness is not necessarily a goal that one should aspire to. One should aspire to be alive in the moment, know what's happening in the moment, know what's happening around you, and know what's happening within you. And if you have that, you are integrated, you're unified, and you're present, and you're alive, and you're real, and you're full. And what you fill your body boundaries to the greatest extent that you can. What more could you ask for in this lifetime? Well, happiness comes, happiness goes. You know, you have a moment. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, I'm getting a new Cadillac. How long does the feeling of happiness last about that Cadillac? It lasts a few minutes. You know, my diamond ring, I like my diamond ring, but it's really very fleeting.
Okay, so
happiness is very transitory. So, I mean, it's wonderful when you have it as a sensation. It's just not a state. I mean, it's not a perpetual state.
I can already see I could have a 3-hour conversation with you just about this encounter at St. Mark's while I was rushing off to try to make it to the expo, but not wanting to miss what they felt was an important speaker. Would you say, I think the name was Pillsbury, there was some mental hospital in the 50s, and she said, can anybody take a guess how many people were there?
Probably Pilgrim.
Pilgrim, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Can anybody take a guess how many people were there? And I guessed, and it was way too low, and somebody who was quite active in the church community.
Say 3,000.
It was something like 17,000. And
Whoa.
she was citing as an example of success that it's only about 1,700 now, and she went through the whole list of the 70s and what they were doing, is now down to about 1,700. But again, now that you're telling me this, I'm obviously very excited because I don't tend to promote artificial things to take, you know. If psychoanalysis was accepted as an institution which protected democracy, do you think that these 17,000 people, being more in touch with their feelings, could work it out and not need medication?
Being in a psychiatric hospital would be about the last place that I would like to be. It might be worse than prison. Because they do, against your will, whether you want to or not, they do fill you with medication. So you really become, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in state mental hospitals.
You have?
Yeah.
For your internship and things like that?
Yeah. And I worked in one also when I was in college. They're zombies. I mean, you have a population that is inherently unstable for the most part. You want to control them. So the best way to control them is by chemically sedating them.
Yeah, I mean,
the hospital, when I worked in college at the State Mental Hospital, I worked in an adolescent ward, and they weren't sedating them quite so much because they were teenagers. And it was before also the, I was in college in '64 to '68, so it was really before the kind of pharmacological revolution that, you know, they were zapping their brains, They were giving them electric convulsive treatment. But
do you think you already have to have an advanced person to work with, not somebody that's challenged with a lot of problems and is really suffering? Right here in MNN, I was on camera once with somebody who was saying get off all medication, and somebody in the control room was going berserk because she really felt that she needed it and it helped her life. Although my friend Molly, who suffers from depression, said that Prozac never worked, and she tended towards natural things. I mean, when the hormesis stone came around, she was so happy that that was addressing a concern she had about a tumor that was growing, and it subsided, so she's more open-minded.
Well, I know that people can feel better from taking drugs, both pharmacological drugs and illegal drugs. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can feel better from eating a spinach salad, too. But again, for my purposes, it's not about feeling better. Mm-hmm. It's about knowing who you are and becoming who you are and fully embodying who you are. And who you are, Freud was a dual drive theorist. Freud believed that there were inherent biologically in us, and there's no escaping it, that there are two drives. He called them Thanatos and Eros. And Thanatos is the death drive, which also is the aggressive drive. So in terms of crazy people, let's say, quote, the man that I trained with, Hyman Spotnitz, he actually found a psychoanalytic system of curing schizophrenia, which had never been done before.
Oh, tell me.
They throw the schizophrenics into the state mental hospitals. That's mostly who you see there. And yeah, they're wild. Schizophrenics can be very wild.
What was his method?
If you understand that basically we all have aggression in us, we are aggressive beings, by virtue of our brains, because we still have the old animal brain. You know, my dog, people come into my apartment and the dog starts, you know, yapping and barking, and sometimes, you know, I have two. Sometimes the white one bites and sometimes the black one bites. You know, that's most of our brain. That's most of the human brain. Mm-hmm. The only thing that differentiates me from my dogs, Sam and Lily, is my neocortex, which is a small part of my brain. Mm-hmm. So, which allows me to think.
You filter that, in other words.
The neocortex informs the old brain, let's say.
I see.
So,
so you're more socialized.
Yeah.
And so a schizophrenic doesn't have that?
Well, a schizophrenic is filled with a lot of aggression that mostly is unconscious, and because you're not born in an unconscious state of aggression. If you've ever seen a newborn, have you ever seen a birth? You know, they come out and they're screaming, and it's not a scream of lamentation, it's a scream of wrath. They're filled with aggression. I mean, you know, they were kind of comfortable in here, and you know, it was dark and wet and nice and moist and warm, and you know, they had enough room, you know, they were a little crowded, but it was kind of comfortable. And then all of a sudden, there's an earthquake. I mean, that's what labor is. It's like an internal earthquake. Everything's all jumbled up and lots of movement, and oh my God, what is happening? And then the way we give birth today, you know, this light, the baby is suddenly, from being in this dark area, suddenly the light is as bright as that light that's shining on me. And, and then somebody hits it on the back.
Yeah, right.
And there are all these people. The only person that the baby is familiar with at that point is the mother. And the mother's not even around in terms of the life of the baby. The doctor's around, the nurse is washing.
But how about the dark, wet births? You know, in the nice.
Yeah,
hot
no,
tanks?
they do. The children come out much. They come out much calmer.
They don't scream.
I don't know that they don't scream. Downs babies don't scream.
So in other words, a schizophrenic, what you're saying is they're expressing more, and that
no. What I'm saying is that you are born into a state of aggression normally. Mm-hmm. That is normal and natural and desired. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. That the baby has gone from a comfortable state now to an uncomfortable state. We could make the uncomfortable state more comfortable, but it's inherently uncomfortable to go from inside here to out here. And so you learn what to do with your aggression. You know, you say to your mom, you say, you know, Betty Sue, you know, just hit me. And I don't like her anymore. Don't say that. Don't tell me you don't like your sister.
Right.
And so the child is programmed to not know, to think that it's not, that either to not know that she's angry, having negative feelings,
or she's wrong.
or that she's a terrible person for having them. So either she suppresses it or she turns the aggression against herself.
Okay.
And she says, I'm bad.
Right. And so what excites you as a psychoanalyst is to get people in touch with those feelings so they know what's going on.
Well,
and
it's even worse than that.
It's worse?
It's worse. As a psychoanalyst, you have to redirect the aggression, and it has to be done within the context of the analysis. So as an analyst, you have to really love to be hated. A schizophrenic has lots of hate that ultimately he's going to bring into the session and into what we call the transference, the relationship between the patient and the analyst. And, and it feels really good because you know when the patient has been trained sufficiently that she can say, she or he can say what she's feeling and not act out the feeling by picking up a chair. And you know, when I was talking about the adolescent ward, those adolescents without drugs, they were acting out all the time. They were picking up chairs, throwing them through windows all the time.
Right.
A schizophrenic might do that.
Right.
A schizophrenic might, a schizophrenic or anybody might say, you know, you're doing a terrible job and I'm quitting. That's an acting out of a feeling. I'm quitting because I'm angry at you, I don't like what you're doing. How about not liking what I'm doing? How about having a terrible feeling about me? And how about let's talking about it and figuring out how we can make the relationship better? And by the way, that's why marriages don't work. Because people act out their negative feelings and they decide to leave each other instead of talking openly about what they're feeling and how they can process each other and their own selves in a way that works integratedly.
But you use the word train, and to me train means not really being in touch or acting from a spontaneous place.
We're animals at heart, yeah. So my dogs, I have to say, I did a lousy job of training my dogs because they still bite some people. And yes, I do see, I mean...
It's also kind of the breed, right? Some breeds are more tendent towards that.
Training is, it has a bad connotation, but really what you're doing is taking the raw material of a psyche and a personality and you're molding it in a way that it becomes art instead of junk.
But now, is it the art of the analyst or is the art of the person
It's the art of
working
creating
together
a life.
It's a two-way thing, the analyst and the person that's going into that too.
Well, then that's the art of self-understanding, of really looking in and seeing who am I.
Now, why did they say before you do a group therapy you have to be in private analysis for 2 years? Isn't that?
Well, it's a model. You know, it's been proposed as an idea. I don't subscribe to it. I put my people in group as soon as I'm ready for them to be in group and as soon as they're ready to be in group. I love group.
Tell me more about that.
I think group is the most revolutionary thing that's been invented since sliced bread.
Who invented it?
Oh, it's not that old. I'm not sure who the first group analyst was, but
the man that you mentioned before that you studied with?
Spotnitz.
Yeah, did he do groups?
Yes, he did.
He did. And did he have schizophrenics, if you go for labels?
You know, it's like in a family constellation, you know, you have a bunch of kids and they're normal and they're doing well and you don't have to worry about them too much. And usually a family can absorb like one kid who's cognitively deficient or one autistic kid. But you know, you get 2 autistic children, 2 Downs kids. It's very stressful. It's very demanding. Right. So in a group, I started this work by doing cancer groups because I come out of cancer training. And I found that everybody was having the same feelings. It was so homogenous and everybody was getting stuck in the same places and nobody was lifting anybody out into a new place. And so I decided I didn't want to do homogenous groups. So now my groups are all heterogeneous. You know, they're all ages, they're men, they're women. Some people have cancer, some people have neuroses, some people have moments of psychosis. You know, it's the gamut, and it makes it an interesting mix.
I can't believe we're to the end of our 28 minutes. And
it's been fun.
It's been wonderful. I encourage you to go to the YouTube posting because now I want to talk about why you want to take this to the internet. Can we go on for 10 more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. What excited you about taking this to the internet?
I have
to be so bold.
Well, about 20 years ago, I wanted to. I think groups are the most exciting thing that is happening. The only thing that there are two things that I enjoy, maybe three things that I enjoy more than running group. One is writing books, one is swimming, and the third one is seeing movies. I think group therapy is like seeing a movie. I think that if people could see a group in action and see it on an ongoing basis, it's like a movie, or like TV. You get to know the characters, you get to know what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and then, so you've known them for a year maybe, and then one woman comes in and says, oh my God, I've got a tumor in my breast, what am I going to do? And the other man says, oh my God, my wife just told me she's leaving me for another man, or she's become a lesbian, she's leaving me for a woman. and you go through these life crises, and even if there are no life crises, there are crises within the room itself. Somebody talks to somebody in the room, and I don't really like what you just said to me. I think you're trying to be mean to me.
Yeah, I think you said, I sent you an email once where someone said that China now owns all our mortgages, and you brought that into a group. I was just astonished. You introduced that, and everybody chewed over that. Some believed it, some didn't believe it, but you brought it up as
we
a
learn to have
topic.
Freedom of thought. So we call it, Jung called it free association. We learn to say what comes into our minds, and it's not that you go out into your outside life and free associate all the time. I mean, we need structure, but you've developed a skill, and this skill is useful when you need it, like when you need math.
Right.
So I went to Time Warner 20 years ago, and I said, I want to do a psychology channel. And I had done a whole big outline of every show that was going to be on it. They said, this is really great. Maybe it was 25 years ago. The only thing is, we're starting another channel right now, and we're putting all of our time and effort into that, and so we don't have room for
another show, I think. Right?
No, channel.
A whole
I
channel?
wanted a channel.
You wanted a whole channel?
I wanted a channel, a psychology channel, and they said, we're starting another channel. And I said, well, what is the channel that you're starting? And it was called Court TV.
I know, and we all know where that went.
So I never got my psychology channel, but ever since then, one of the shows that I was going to do on that channel was a live group therapy.
Just one of the shows,
yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so that has been in my mind for all these years, and now I think the internet makes it possible. I don't know that network TV is doing the treatment, but it's not real. Real is, with the...
You want real.
I want real.
You want real people. You've advertised on Craigslist. Now,
so I want to make an announcement that if anybody wants to join my group therapy, that I'm offering it free of charge, and the payment is that you have to agree to let it be on YouTube.
Right. And that's a pretty significant payment, right? Instead of, usually you charge $60?
Well, I feel that by the time you're cured analytically, and I put the word cure, cured is like cured like a ham. You're delectable and sweet and mature. So by the time you have had enough analytic treatment, Paula, you talk a lot about transparency. The idea is that anybody can pretty much know anything about you. There's no shame about who you are. Right. And so I don't see any problem with people wanting to go on YouTube and be in group therapy for the whole world to watch. I would do it if I were a patient. Well, I would happily do it.
But what about, like this social worker was talking about the different mental illnesses. Isn't exhibitionism some kind of a neurosis?
Sure.
Don't you expect that you might?
I expect a lot of exhibitionists to come, and I welcome them. Okay. I mean, we're not here today without having an exhibitionistic tendency.
Yeah, of course.
I don't speak at conferences. I speak at professional conferences. Keynote speaker, I speak in front of 500 people. I don't do that without having a touch of exhibitionism.
Yes, exactly. I mean, somebody was complaining to me about big egos, probably my own included. And I realized, though, when I thought about people I like to hang around with, I'm attracted to big egos because big egos like to do big things. And I think life is such a great gift that that's the way you say thank you.
Yeah.
That it's just so precious. It's that precious. But your own group itself, or the one of your regular groups, how many regular groups do you have running in a week? 3. Mm-hmm. You were really excited with one in particular, and you thought they might want to go on YouTube or the internet. But
well, I certainly couldn't admit that on TV because the two groups that I wouldn't be talking about would be very upset.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even know which one I had in mind when I said that to you. But
all I know is that you made an announcement to one group and you had hoped that they would go for it, and you were disappointed that they wouldn't. And then we decided, well, we'll just start all over and we'll make the announcement.
Right.
And that's, ladies and gentlemen, what this show is all about. Even though we ran over 28 minutes, but I'll edit it back to get it into MNN also. But we'll put it out in its totality on the internet, and then we'll just sort of see where we go with it. Anything else you want to say about it?
It's been fun.
It's really been nice, as always, working with you. And maybe talk about your show? You're going to be calling it Duopoly now?
You told me I can't.
Well, MNN can't change it because you're down as Inspirations, which has to do with the spa. I know they corrected the spelling, which wasn't an incorrect spelling. Can you talk about the evolution of your show?
I'm just going along each week at a time to see what moves me and who I want to invite. So it's just about...
Well, we can call it Duopoly. It just won't be in the program that way. So we'll create all the shows and put them up on the internet. Okay. Can you tell people, though, about Duopoly? I love that concept.
I was thinking today that it's about, its duality becomes unified, unification, something like that. There was some phrase that I was trying to work through in my mind.
So the idea is that you...
Well, we are beings of duality. I mean, we talk about the old brain and the neocortex, the new brain, and we talk about the left and right hemispheres, and we talk about eros and thanatos. Everything is dual, yin and yang.
The dark side of love?
But love and its dark side. So, but the point is that mind-body, I am a believer in work towards resolving psychosomatic illness, mind-body. Psychosomatic illness, by the way, is when aggression, schizophrenia is when aggression is turned against the mind and destroys the mind and makes it chaotic. Psychosomatic illness is when aggression is turned against the body and we call it stress, but it's really aggression turned against the body.
I don't know if this is true or not. Some people said that there's some schizophrenics that don't age. Because you were just saying it's not turned against the body but the mind. Would that be not buying into a social consensus?
I think that if your defenses are really strong against conflict, that your face becomes very unexpressive, which we might call not aging.
Oh, really? Interesting.
But a life without conflict is not a human life.
Wow. I wonder, there was a great person that Alan interviewed about face reading, and so she was talking about the importance of the way your face goes, and even after facelifts, they'll go back to a certain way, and that's important that it is that way because it expresses something. But but to be turned against your own mind, that sounds very stressful.
To be turned, you put it in passive verb, to be turned against your own mind. It's not that you are to be turned. You turn against your own mind. It's active. You destroy your mental functioning.
What is a mind?
Well, a mind creates and it organizes. It also organizes your experience.
I know in the Indian system of philosophy, they say the mind is the receptacle of the senses. So it's a product of the sensory input. And I think once you described to me, you told me crazy.
But it's much more than receiving. That's the point. That was Freud's point. It's construction. And we know today from research, there's a lot of research on eyewitness accounts. You know, you see something and it's a perception, and then you construct it. And eyewitness accounts, you know, they know from court testimony. It's very unreliable. So because it's construction.
So it would be erroneous to think that perception is a passive process.
It's absolutely not passive.
It's also active.
It's all active.
It's all active?
Everything is active.
If it's all active, then we can create our own world.
Yeah. We do create our own worlds every moment.
So maybe
we create our own worlds every moment, except that what happens is that you have experiences in childhood and you begin to organize your experience because the mind does that as one of its functions, but you organize it in a way that it begins to repeat itself. And so when so you're used to being criticized for instance, as a child because your mother's critical, and then somebody says to you as an adult something that you experience as critical even though they didn't intend it that way.
Right.
So we call that the repetition compulsion. And what Freud understood about that is that we have a stronger drive than pleasure. He called it beyond the pleasure principle. An even stronger drive than the need and desire to experience pleasure is the need and desire to repeat, to go to what's familiar.
To what's familiar.
So we are always repeating our unresolved conflicts from childhood in our adult life.
Don't you think real meditation should be breaking that, so you're not going to what's familiar, even though probably most people want to go to familiar peace?
I think meditation and psychoanalysis both accomplish the same thing.
I see.
Which is inner freedom.
Can you talk a few minutes, because the tape's going to run out? Sigmund Freud, sometimes he's popular and sometimes he isn't. I know when I grew up in Berkeley, he was kind of worshipped. And yet
really?
It seems as though now the feeling is...
because of Marcuse and Norman O'Brien, probably.
I don't know. I mean...
They were big in Berkeley.
Really?
Norman O'Brien taught at Santa Cruz.
Oh, yeah, right. I wasn't in the psychology department. I was a philosophy major, but I sense you're pro-Freud.
I'm a Freudian.
You're Freudian.
Yeah.
Are all psychoanalysts Freudians?
Yes.
They are.
Well, Freud invented psychoanalysis, by definition they are, but a lot of them have embraced other models of thinking, and so they might say they're a Jungian as opposed to Freudian, but the origin, just like the origin of Christianity is Judaism, the origin of all analysis is Freud.
I think the general sense, from what I pick up as an outsider to the field, is that some of the hysteria that Freud was analyzing, they felt was actual abuse, and because he had prominent clients.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter?
No. It's not the point that Freud was making. The point Freud was making was whether you were abused or were not abused, it's what it is that you do, how you construct that experience or non-experience. It's the active, imaginative fantasy, creative fantasy that your mind is capable of. That's what Freud was interested in studying, and that's what analysts study. Whether you call yourself a Freudian, a Jungian, a Kleinian, a Adlerian, or whatever.
Right. Have you ever been on panels or worked with people who do believe in medication?
Many therapists believe in medication. Most therapists
Because
believe.
what this social worker was saying is
analysts don't believe in medication. Most
don't.
therapists, most psychotherapists believe in medication.
Okay, so an analyst
Today.
wouldn't, because they feel even a little medication might restrict access to feelings. Is that right?
Thoughts and feelings.
Because the medication would stop that?
Yeah.
It seems as
it changes the structure of the mind to take a drug.
Now, what about in the case of hemp oil? I heard that very tiny amounts, not enough to get high, can break addictions. Now, could it be that you embrace this feeling of, maybe it gives you a slight feeling of expansion, and that feeling of expansion makes you more fortified that you can create a new reality, say a cancer-free body?
Well, you know, I think Dick Cavett was, he was seriously depressed for decades, and he had electric shock treatment, and he said it really worked. I think because of this concept that you begin to think and feel in patterned ways, and that we repeat all the time. We're always looking for what's familiar.
Oh, you break the pattern that way.
You can break
electrical.
You're jumbling the brain.
That's really interesting.
Right.
You know, my experience.
And you can break the pattern with drugs, and so people can feel better.
I see.
And usually they feel better initially when they go on drugs, and then they kind of settle into the same, whatever that new pattern is.
Right.
That becomes the repetitive
pattern. Kind of like the facelift in the body.
Exactly.
The face goes
it's
back
exactly
to,
like the facelift.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that would be interesting.
So if you go on a trip, you know, you kind of jumble your brain cells.
Yeah.
You know,
You look great after your trip, by the way, Jane.
It's neuronal. It's really physiological.
Neuronal. Okay.
Because when you're a baby, neuron A fires, hits neuron B, fires, hits neuron C, and then you have an ABC pattern.
Right.
And then you repeat that when you're 4 and you repeat it when you're 12. But then if you do something new, you might create neuron A fires and hits neuron H, which hits neuron Z.
Yeah.
And you have a new thought or a new feeling.
Right. Interesting.
So it's all about give me a new thought and give me a new feeling, because then I know you're actively creating your inner life.
Well, give me another show, Jane, and many more. So we're going to have to call it a close right now. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for joining me on Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. It's been an exciting adventure with Dr. Jane G. Goldberg. Thanks. So I know you have to fly away to your analysis appointment.
Yes.
And I guess, is Sharon there? Yeah, so we'll put you on and we'll get rolling. Yeah, yeah. I think that was really nice, you guys.
See, I think I do better as an interviewee than an interviewer.
Yeah?
I think so.
Well, but you're right.
I feel
wait
stilted as an interviewer.
Well, but you're just beginning, you know.
But I have too much to say.
Oh, I see. You like to bounce off someone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do the rabbi, if he can do it.
Yeah.
And I want to invite my group therapy people.
Okay.
And talk about that. And I also have in mind to do a show. If I have the pulse magnetic back, I want to do a 15-minute pulse magnetic and 15-minute with the facial.
We've got to have share with that.
I want to do a facial.
Is it rolling?
Yeah, Josh, put it
Okay,
up.
just put me up so I can see, and I'll just lead into it.
Rolling.
Okay. I know, rolling black. All I see is black. Hey, great. So we're back with Jane G. Goldberg, PhD, and she's going to be making a comment that she wasn't able to get in, an important statement, I guess.
I wanted to talk about the Smithsonian exhibit on Freud, and I'm not sure how long ago it was, maybe 6 years. It was a big exhibit that was planned, and it was canceled. It was canceled because a petition was sent around. Gloria Steinem, by the way, was one of the lead people that was interested in handing this petition out. I grew up with Gloria Steinem. I mean, I grew up intellectually with her, not as my next door neighbor or anything. I mean, she's a hero of mine. But she opposed the Freud exhibit at the Smithsonian because of Freud's sexism.
Oh, I see.
Supposed sexism. And a man named Jonathan Lear, who himself has been analyzed and writes about, he's not really a practicing clinician as a psychoanalyst, but he's a professor of philosophy, and he teaches about psychoanalysis and thinks about psychoanalysis. And he wrote an article for a magazine.
Just want to make sure this is pointed.
In defense of the exhibit. And he's the one that made the point about how important it is that you have psychoanalysis in a democracy, that those two are absolutely interlinked and intertwined.
Can we get him on your show?
Well, he lives in Chicago.
Well, maybe he'll come over to New York.
So I wanted to...
Well, let's get Gloria Steinem on your show, and maybe she just doesn't know. Maybe she just doesn't know.
No, she clearly doesn't know. I think most people don't really understand the meaning of psychoanalysis.
Right.
And you know, if you go to a party and people start talking about Freud or whatever, and you know, you hear a lot of negative comments about Freud, and you look around and you realize there is not a person in that room that has read a single word of Freud.
Really?
Yeah. People don't read Freud except psychoanalysts.
Have you been introduced to René Girard, Violence in the Sacred?
No.
Saying at the basis of every sacred act is an act of violence.
Well, Freud, that's a Freudian thought.
Yeah, but he talked about totem and taboo as a limitation of understanding the concept of pharmakos. Pharmakos were people, ill-fated souls, kept at state expense to be sacrificed on a regular basis. And I was even wondering if people have within them this sort of need, if everything, like to get something, you have to give something. Maybe if people are guilty, they want to, on some level, suffer to sort of repay for something that they feel they did wrong. Maybe that's a mechanism that runs in people.
You know, I think the point is that everything is human. Every feeling that you can think of and every defense against feeling that you can think of, it's all what constitutes being human.
And the defense against the feeling would be pain. People don't want to feel the pain?
Well, there are many defenses, and there are many ways of defending.
Why would you want to defend against feeling and being alive? Because it hurts?
You would want to defend against your aggression if you were taught to, as we talked about earlier. You would want to defend against loving somebody if you're afraid of being hurt. You would defend against, you would defend against mourning. You would, I mean, any feeling some people don't want to have. Name a feeling. There are people that don't want to have that feeling. There are people that think that they shouldn't have that feeling.
Well, they want the high and not the low. That's what Buddha said. You know, he said for every pleasure there's a pain, and everyone thinks, well, they can figure out some way around it. It's like how to negotiate with God and win.
Well, the way to negotiate with God and win is to know that there's also an anti-God.
Okay.
That people have called the devil in the past.
I see. And I just want to say at this point, one of Jane's books that was received with critical acclaim is The Dark Side of Love.
The positive role of our negative emotions.
Yeah.
Is the subtitle, and
Right.
that pretty much says it all.
Were you kind of caught in the publishing world in flux? Because women who love too much is what comes to mind straight away on that topic.
The Dark Side of Love was meant to be the sequel to Women Who Love Too Much, which probably most of your audience wouldn't remember because that book is maybe 15, 20 years old, but it was a runaway bestseller. Jeremy Tarcher, who owned the last independently owned publishing house, published that book. And it was, you know, a great book for him. And during the course of my writing, The Dark Side of Love, a book that he was vying for, another publisher gave that author an advance that was the sum total of his advance money for the whole year, for all of his books. He said, I can't compete in this world anymore, and I've spent my life building this business. I don't want to just see it go down the tubes, and so he sold it to Putnam. And The Dark Side of Love was one of the first books, or maybe the first book that came out under the Tarcher Putnam imprint. So it was kind of in a transition period, but it did fine.
You had said that books weren't in the bookstores when you went on national TV.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think, was still making decisions as though he was running J.P. Tarcher, and so yeah, I was doing the talk show route, and
yeah.
So it should have done better.
Philip Lippitt's Jane produced a DVD of scientists talking about radiation hormesis, and Philip Lippitt's is an author has done some best-selling books too. He said it happened to him also. Oh. So it seems as though the publishing world is
publishing is a business.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, you can have a great book, and it doesn't mean that it is going to be bought or sold. You know, bought by the publisher and then sold to the public.
I notice how you never skip a beat. You never, you said that you brought your book to 30 people. You know, there were 29 rejections before the last one came. And when the latest book that you've done on science, really, radiation hormesis, you self-published. And
yeah,
it seems like you came to that decision so easily.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things happened. One is that there was a financial meltdown, and I have a book now that's with an agent, the top agent in the world. And every time I call her, she says, yes, HarperCollins wants it. So-and-so wants it. But guess what? The editor that was there that wants it was just let go.
Right, yeah.
So the
Either
publishing...
you or someone said 69 editors were let go.
The publishing world is so in flux that nobody can accomplish anything.
Yeah, so you just go ahead and do it yourself.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And it has a built-in audience. Whoever wants to know about how to cure themselves of all kinds of horrible diseases, which is probably most people.
Another show. So for now, you want to say that maybe the Freud exhibit should be reconsidered?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It won't be, but sure.
Okay, let's hope.
Why not learn more about Freud?
Okay. Thanks for joining me, Jane. And
yeah, that really was kind of riff-raff, that stuff.
Okay, well, we'll
Well, that was good, Jane.
What about Gloria Steinem, though? We should.
I want to interview Gloria Steinem, too. Can we bring her down here?
Who knows?
Are you in touch with her?
No. I've never been in touch with her.
Well, we'll figure out something. Sherry, you want
I
to?
grew up intellectually with her.
Oh, I've met her.
I've never met her. It's wonderful. Thanks, dear.
I've met her. She's very nice.
so
I
glad I
heard
got
she
to
had
hear
it
that.
out.
That's
Oh, good.
wonderful. Some of
Yeah.
what she said kind of ties in with what I want to say.
Oh, good.
And,
Oh, Sherry, you look beautiful.
thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Jane.
Bye, Jane.
Well, let me know.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, let me know about Friday.
Yes.
I think the tape is still rolling, so we
I
can
think
just
you'd be really
stop.
happy with being the head of a panel, Jane.